At my husband's funeral, my children sat in the front row, draped in designer black, while they placed me at the very back, hidden behind the speakers like a shameful secret. I was 60 years old, and I had never felt more invisible in my life. "Mom, people are saying you caused his death," my eldest daughter Catherine whispered, her perfectly manicured hand gripping my arm. "Don't draw attention, please." The words hit like a slap. My own children believed I'd killed their father, or worse, they were making others believe it. As I wiped my tears with a disintegrating tissue, a stranger in a decorated military uniform suddenly sat beside me. His presence commanded instant respect, his chest covered in medals I didn't recognize. He leaned close, his voice barely audible beneath the minister's eulogy. "Don't react. They're about to be exposed." My heart stopped. When my children turned and saw him, all three of their faces went deathly white. Catherine dropped her funeral program. James grabbed the pew to steady himself. And David, my gentle youngest, looked like he might be sick. They knew this man, and they were terrified of him. The minister's voice echoed through the speakers. "If anyone wishes to speak about the deceased, please come forward." The uniformed stranger rose to his feet, his movements precise and deliberate. My children's expressions transformed from fear to absolute panic. "I have something to say about Daniel Ashworth," the man announced, his voice carrying across the cemetery like a death sentence. And everything I thought I knew about my family was about to shatter. Hello, welcome to another emotional story of family betrayal. Heartbreak and redemption. I am certain that this story will touch you differently today. If you enjoy this story, then like this video, subscribe for more stories, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Let's begin. The sky over Greenwood Cemetery hung low and gray, pregnant with rain that refused to fall. I stood at the very back of the gathering, behind the towering speakers that broadcast the eulogy I could barely hear. My black dress, the only one I owned, was 10 years old, frayed at the hem, a stark contrast to the designer mourning clothes my children wore in the front row. From where I stood, I could see the back of their heads, perfectly coiffed, perfectly composed. My daughter Catherine's blonde highlights caught what little light filtered through the clouds. My middle son James sat with military straightness, his hand resting protectively on his younger brother David's shoulder. They looked like a magazine spread for grief. Beautiful, untouchable, united, without me. I was 60 years old, and I had never felt more invisible in my life. The wind picked up, carrying with it the scent of fresh-turned earth and expensive perfume. I clutched my tissue, already damp and disintegrating, and tried to focus on the words floating back to me through the speakers. The minister was saying something about my husband's generosity, his business acumen, his devotion to family. I almost laughed. Almost. But the sound caught in my throat and came out as something between a sob and a cough. "Mom!" I turned to find Catherine standing beside me, her green eyes cold despite the tears that had been so carefully applied with the help of eye drops, no doubt. She was 32 and had inherited her father's height and his ability to look through people rather than at them. "Mom, you need to keep it together," she whispered, her voice sharp enough to cut. "People are already talking." "Talking?" I repeated, my voice hoarse. I'd barely slept in the 3 days since Daniel died. Since my husband of 37 years had collapsed in his study, surrounded by papers I wasn't allowed to see, clutching his chest while his children rushed to his side, and I was told to wait in the kitchen. "Yes, talking." Catherine's jaw tightened. She glanced over her shoulder at the sea of black-clad mourners. They're saying the stress you caused him, the arguments, your constant demands for attention, they're saying it contributed to his heart attack. The words hit me like a physical blow. I stumbled back a step, my heels sinking into the soft ground. "That's not—" "I never—" "Please, Mom." James had appeared on my other side, equally immaculate in his charcoal suit. "Don't make a scene, not here, not today. Just stay quiet. Stay back here. Let people remember Dad the way he deserves to be remembered. Let them remember the lie he meant." Let them remember the version of Daniel Ashworth who was the devoted husband, the successful businessman, the pillar of the community, not the man who had slowly, systematically, turned his children against me over the past 5 years. Not the man who had become a stranger in our own home. "I loved your father," I whispered, but James had already turned away, guiding Catherine back toward the front where David waited. His young face, only 27, twisted with what looked like genuine anguish, or maybe it was just better acting. I stood there, abandoned once more, as the minister droned on about resurrection and eternal peace. The speakers crackled. Someone coughed. A woman in the third row, I didn't even know her name, turned to look at me, her expression a mixture of pity and suspicion. This was my life now, the widow blamed for her husband's death, the mother exiled to the back of her own husband's funeral, the woman who had given everything, my youth, my dreams, my identity, only to be erased when I was no longer convenient. I closed my eyes and tried to remember the Daniel I had married, the young man with gentle hands and big dreams who had promised me the world. But that memory was like looking through fog. Somewhere along the way, he had disappeared, replaced by someone I no longer recognized, someone who listened to our children's poison and believed it, someone who looked at me with disappointment rather than love. The wind gusted again, colder this time, and I shivered. That's when I heard the footsteps. Heavy, measured, military precise. I opened my eyes to find a man standing beside me. He was tall, at least 6'2", with iron gray hair cut short, and a face that had seen hard years but wore them with dignity. He wore a military dress uniform, dark blue with rows of medals across his chest. Ribbons I didn't understand. Insignia I couldn't name. But there was something about him that commanded respect, even in silence. He didn't ask permission. He simply sat down in the empty chair beside mine, his movements crisp and controlled. I started to speak, to ask who he was, but he turned his head slightly and caught my eye. His gaze was intense, sharp blue eyes that seemed to see through pretense and straight to truth. "Don't react," he murmured, his voice barely above a whisper, pitch so only I could hear beneath the minister's amplified words. "They're about to be exposed." My heart stuttered. "What?" I said, "Don't react, Victoria." He knew my name. This stranger knew my name. "Just sit, watch, and wait." The way he said it, calm, certain, with the weight of absolute authority, made me obey without thinking. I faced forward again, my hands trembling in my lap, every nerve ending suddenly alive with a fear I didn't understand. Who was this man? But then I saw it, the moment my children noticed him. Catherine turned first, probably to check if I was still behaving myself, still staying small and quiet and invisible. Her eyes landed on the man beside me, and I watched her face transform. The careful composure cracked like ice under pressure. Her lips parted. Her eyes widened. The color drained from her cheeks so quickly I thought she might faint. She grabbed James's arm with enough force that he turned sharply, annoyance flashing across his features, until he saw what she was seeing. Until he saw him. James went rigid, completely still. His hand, which had been resting on the back of the pew, began to shake visibly. He said something to David, who looked back with curiosity that turned to shock, then something darker, something like terror. All three of them stared at the man beside me. All three of them looked like they'd seen a ghost, or worse, like they'd seen their reckoning walking toward them in polished shoes. The minister was still speaking, something about ashes to ashes, but I couldn't hear him anymore. The blood was rushing too loudly in my ears. My children's faces, their fear, their panic, had unlocked something in me, a spark of something I'd thought they'd extinguished. "Hope, who are you?" I whispered to the man without turning my head. "Someone who kept a promise to your husband," he replied quietly. His eyes never left my children. "Someone who's been watching, waiting for the right moment." "What promise?" "The one he made me keep before he died. The one where I swore I would make sure you knew the truth, all of it, and that justice would be served." The truth. Justice. The words felt foreign in my mouth, like a language I'd forgotten how to speak. David had turned completely around now, staring at us openly, his face ashen. Catherine was whispering urgently to James, her hands moving in sharp, anxious gestures. James shook his head, equally urgent, but I could see the fear in his eyes, even from this distance. They knew this man, they knew him, and they were terrified of him. "The service is almost over," the man said, his voice still that same controlled murmur. "When the minister asks if anyone wishes to speak, I'm going to stand. I need you to stay seated, no matter what I say, no matter how they react. Can you do that?" Could I? I didn't know. I didn't know anything anymore, except that this stranger sitting beside me, this man in uniform with his chest full of medals and his eyes full of purpose, knew something my children desperately didn't want revealed. "Why?" I asked. Why are you doing this?" For the first time, his expression softened. Just slightly. Just enough that I caught a glimpse of something beneath the military bearing. Grief, perhaps, or loyalty. "Because Daniel was my brother in every way that mattered," he said. "And because what they did to him, what they did to you," his jaw tightened. "Some debts must be paid, even after death." The minister's voice rose slightly, approaching the conclusion of his remarks. "And now," he said, his words crackling through the speakers, "if anyone wishes to share a memory or say a few words about Daniel Ashworth, I invite you to come forward." Silence fell over the cemetery, the kind of silence that presses down on your chest and makes it hard to breathe. Catherine was shaking her head vigorously now, trying to catch the minister's eye, trying to signal something, but the man beside me was already rising, smooth and unhurried, his uniform immaculate, his bearing impossible to ignore. Every head turned, every eye focused on him. He stepped around the speakers, moving toward the front, with the confidence of someone who had walked into hostile territory 1,000 times and emerged victorious every time. I watched my children's faces cycle through emotions I'd never seen them express: fear, rage, desperation, and something that might have been shame. The man reached the podium and turned to face the crowd. The minister stepped aside, clearly uncertain but unwilling to challenge someone who commanded such immediate authority. "My name is Colonel William Hayes," he said, his voice strong and clear, needing no amplification. "I served with Daniel Ashworth for 15 years in situations most of you cannot imagine and would not believe if I told you." He paused, letting that sink in. I could see confusion rippling through the crowd, whispers starting. Daniel had never mentioned military service. He'd told everyone he'd built his business from scratch, starting in his 20s, no detours. Another lie. "Daniel Ashworth was one of the finest men I ever knew," Hayes continued. "Brave, loyal, willing to sacrifice everything for those he loved." His eyes found mine across the distance, held my gaze for one meaningful second. "He made mistakes, as we all do, but in the end, he tried to make things right." Catherine stood up abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the ground. "This is inappropriate. Sit down." Hayes's voice didn't rise in volume, but it carried such command that Catherine actually flinched. "You'll have your chance to speak, after I'm finished." She sat, but her hands were balled into fists, her face flushed with rage. Hayes turned back to the crowd. "Before his death, Daniel asked me to deliver a message, to ensure certain truths came to light, to protect someone who had been silenced and blamed for crimes they did not commit." He paused. "That message will be delivered. That protection will be provided. That truth will be revealed." The cemetery was utterly silent now, except for the wind rustling through the trees. "Daniel Ashworth knew he was dying," Hayes said, his voice softer, but no less powerful. "And in his final weeks, he made arrangements. He left evidence. He recorded testimony. He put safeguards in place to ensure that what was done in darkness would be brought into the light." James was on his feet now, too, his face red. "You have no right." "I have every right." Hayes cut him off with the precision of a blade. I have the right given to me by your father. I have the right of a witness to injustice, and I have the right of someone who keeps his promises, especially to the dead. He looked at my children one by one, his gaze like judgment itself. Some debts, he repeated slowly, must be paid, even after death. Then he folded his hands behind his back, gave a small nod to the minister, and walked back toward me with the same measured pace. The crowd parted for him like water around a stone. My children stood frozen, their careful facade shattered, their fear now visible to everyone who cared to look. Hayes returned to his seat beside me and leaned close. When this is over, don't go home with them. Come with me. There are things you need to see, things Daniel left for you. I don't understand, I whispered, my mind reeling. You will, he promised. Before this day is done, Victoria, you will understand everything. The minister was hastily concluding the service now, clearly desperate to restore order. People were standing, moving toward their cars, casting backward glances at me and the man beside me and my children, who stood in a tight huddle, their heads bent together in urgent conversation. As the crowd dispersed, Hayes stood and offered me his arm. I took it, grateful for the steadiness when my own legs felt like water. We walked toward the parking area, and I could feel my children's eyes boring into my back, feel their panic rising like heat. Colonel Hayes, I said softly as we walked, what did my husband tell you? What did they do? He stopped beside a black sedan, pulled out a key fob, and opened the passenger door for me. His face was grave. They didn't just turn him against you, Victoria, he said. They blackmailed him. They forged documents. They isolated you. And in the end, he paused, something painful flickering across his features. In the end, one of them made sure he wouldn't live long enough to undo what they'd done. The world tilted. My vision blurred. You're saying... I'm saying your husband didn't die of natural causes, Hayes said quietly. And before he lost consciousness, he told me everything. He told me who. He told me why. And he told me to make sure you survived to see justice done. Behind us. I heard Catherine calling my name, her voice shrill with false concern. Hayes's hand tightened on my elbow, steadying me. The question is, he said, his blue eyes searching mine, are you strong enough to hear the truth? Because once I show you what Daniel left behind, there's no going back. Your life, your understanding of the past 37 years, will never be the same. I looked back at my children, at Catherine's desperate expression, at James's clenched jaw, at David's pale, frightened face. Then I looked at this stranger who had appeared at my darkest hour, this man who claimed to hold the truth in his hands. Show me, I said, my voice stronger than I'd heard it in years. Show me everything. He nodded once, satisfied, and helped me into the car. As we drove away from the cemetery, I watched through the rear window as my children stood in the parking lot, growing smaller in the distance. They looked lost, abandoned, the way I had felt for 5 long years. And for the first time since Daniel had died, I felt something other than grief and confusion. I felt the first stirrings of anger, and somewhere beneath that, buried deep but beginning to wake, the will to fight back. Colonel Hayes drove in silence for the first 10 minutes, navigating through the quiet suburban streets I'd known for decades, but now felt alien to me. Everything looked different through the lens of what he'd just revealed. The coffee shop where Daniel and I used to have Sunday breakfast, the park where we'd pushed our children on swings, the library where I'd spent countless hours while my husband worked late, or so he'd told me. Had any of it been real? Where are we going? I finally asked, my voice sounding small in the confined space of the car. Somewhere safe, somewhere your children don't know about. Hayes glanced at me briefly before returning his eyes to the road. Daniel rented a storage unit 18 months ago, put it under a false name, paid cash, left everything in my care. He knew he was running out of time. 18 months? My mind struggled to process this. He knew he was... You're saying he knew someone was trying to kill him? Not at first. Hayes's jaw tightened. At first, he just knew something was wrong. Money disappearing, documents being altered. Your children suddenly very interested in his health, his medications, his will. He started investigating quietly. By the time he figured out the full scope of it, he realized he couldn't go to the police without solid proof, and he couldn't confront them without putting you in danger. Me! I laughed, a bitter sound. They'd already destroyed me, Colonel. What more could they do? Kill you and make it look like grief-induced suicide, Hayes said flatly. That was the plan, Victoria. After Daniel died, after they got control of everything, you were supposed to follow. Tragic widow, couldn't live without her husband, history of mental instability. They'd already started laying that groundwork with the neighbors, hadn't they? The casual cruelty in his words, the matter-of-fact way he described my planned murder, should have shocked me. Instead, I felt a strange numbness settling over me like frost. The arguments, I whispered. The times they told people I was paranoid, unstable, making accusations about them stealing from their father. All documentation, building a narrative. Hayes pulled into a storage facility on the outskirts of town, one I'd never noticed despite driving past it hundreds of times. Your husband figured it out too late to stop everything, but not too late to leave you the weapons to fight back. He parked in front of Unit 247 and turned to face me fully for the first time since we'd left the cemetery. In the harsh fluorescent lighting of the parking area, I could see the lines of exhaustion around his eyes, the weight he carried. Before we go in there, I need you to understand something, he said. What you're about to learn will hurt. It will make you question everything you believed about your marriage, your children, your entire adult life. Daniel knew that. It ate him alive in those final weeks, but he also knew the only way to save you was to tell you the complete truth. Did he really care? The question escaped before I could stop it. Or did he just feel guilty? Hayes's expression softened. He cared, Victoria. He cared so much it destroyed him when he realized what he'd allowed to happen, what he'd participated in. He paused. Daniel wasn't a perfect man, but he loved you. That much, I promise you, was real. I nodded, not trusting my voice, and followed him out of the car. The storage unit was small, no bigger than a walk-in closet. Inside sat a single filing box, a laptop, and a manila envelope with my name written across it in Daniel's distinctive handwriting. My hand trembled as I reached for it. That one first, Hayes said gently. He wanted you to read his words before you saw the evidence, said you deserved that much. I sat down on the cold concrete floor, my funeral dress pooling around me, and opened the envelope with fingers that barely cooperated. Inside was a letter, several pages long, dated 3 weeks before Daniel's death. My dearest Victoria, if you're reading this, then I'm gone, and William has kept his promise to bring you here. I don't have much time. They've started increasing the dosage, and I can feel myself getting weaker. So I need to say this quickly and clearly. I failed you, not just recently, but for years. I let our children poison me against you so slowly, so subtly, that I didn't realize what was happening until it was too late. They were so clever about it, Vic, so patient. A word here, a concern there, always wrapped in love and worry. Mom seems confused lately, don't you think, Dad? Did Mom tell you about that strange thing she said? I'm worried about her mental state. Mom's been asking about money again. Do you think she has a spending problem? Little drops of poison, year after year, until I started seeing you through their distorted lens instead of my own eyes. Until I started believing you were the problem, instead of seeing that they were creating problems to solve. The letter blurred as tears filled my eyes. I wiped them away roughly and continued reading. It started 5 years ago. Catherine's husband left her. Did you know that? She never told you. She told you they separated amicably, but the truth is, he left because he discovered she'd been embezzling from his company. She needed money. A lot of it. Fast. She came to James with a plan. James, who'd made terrible investments and was drowning in debt he'd hidden from everyone, including his wife. Together, they approached David, the youngest, the one who always followed his siblings' lead. They convinced him you were trying to turn me against them, that you wanted all my money for yourself, that they needed to protect their inheritance. They showed me forged documents, emails they claimed you'd sent to lawyers, discussing how to get me declared incompetent, bank statements they'd altered to make it look like you were siphoning money. They even hired someone to call me pretending to be a concerned financial advisor, warning me you were planning to leave me and take everything. I believed them, Victoria. God help me, I believed them. My hands were shaking so violently now that the pages rattled. Hayes crouched beside me, his presence steady and grounding. Once they had me turned against you, the rest was easy. They had me change my will, sign power of attorney documents while I was on pain medication after my knee surgery. You remember that, 2 years ago? They had me transfer assets into trusts they controlled. They even had me sign papers putting the house in Catherine's name for estate planning purposes. And then, 6 months ago, I found something I wasn't supposed to find. James had left his laptop open at the house. I was looking for a document, and I saw an email chain. Victoria, they were discussing how to accelerate my death. Catherine had researched medications that could cause heart failure in someone with my condition. James had found a doctor willing to prescribe unnecessary drugs. David was supposed to make sure I took them all. That's when I knew. That's when I finally saw what I'd been too blind to see before. My own children were killing me. I couldn't breathe. The concrete floor seemed to tilt beneath me. Hayes's hand steadied my shoulder. "Keep reading," he said quietly. "There's more." I couldn't go to the police. They'd covered their tracks too well, and I'd signed too many documents giving them legal authority. Any accusations I made would look like the dementia they'd been claiming I had. But I could document everything, record conversations, save emails, gather proof, and I could reach out to William. You never knew about my time in the service. I kept it from you, another one of my failures. I was young and stupid, and thought I was protecting you from that part of my life. But William and I served together in ways that create bonds deeper than blood. When I told him what was happening, he believed me immediately. He helped me gather evidence. He became my eyes and ears when I was too weak to do it myself. The last thing I discovered, the worst thing, was what they planned to do to you after I was gone. Victoria, they were going to make it look like you killed yourself. Catherine had already drafted the note. James had researched untraceable methods. They were going to wait 3 months after my death, long enough for people to believe you were consumed by grief, and then they were going to murder you and take everything. My children, our children, the babies we held and loved and sacrificed for. Monsters! The word was written with such force that the pen had nearly torn through the paper. I'm so sorry. My darling, sorry for believing them, sorry for turning cold when you needed me most. Sorry for making you feel invisible and crazy and unwanted. You deserved so much better than what I gave you. I can't undo the past 5 years. I can't give you back the time I stole from us. But I can give you truth, evidence, and protection. Everything you need to destroy them legally is in the box William will show you. Bank records, forged documents, recorded conversations, proof of theft, fraud, and attempted murder. William has already contacted federal investigators. This goes beyond local police now. The house you think Catherine owns? It's yours. I had the transfer reversed through a lawyer they don't know about. The accounts they think they control? Frozen and under investigation. The trust fund they think they'll inherit? It goes to charity. Every penny, if you choose. Or you can have it. It was always meant for you anyway. I've also left you something else. A video. I recorded it 3 days ago, while I still had the strength. It's my full confession, my testimony about what they did and what they planned. William will make sure the right people see it. But first, I need you to see it. I need you to hear me say the words I should have said to your face. I'm sorry. I love you. And I should have chosen you from the beginning. By the time you read this, I'll be gone. They'll probably succeed in killing me. I'm too weak now to fight the medications they're giving me. But they won't get away with it. They won't destroy you the way they destroyed me. William has sworn to protect you, and that man has never broken an oath in his life. Trust him. Follow his guidance. And when this is over, when they're held accountable for what they've done. I want you to live, Victoria. Really live. Not the half-life I condemned you to. Find joy again. Find peace. Find yourself, the woman I fell in love with before I lost my way. I'm so sorry I couldn't be the man you deserved, but I can at least give you justice. All my love, broken though it is. Daniel, I sat there on that cold floor, the letter crumpled against my chest, and wept. Not gentle tears, but great heaving sobs that came from somewhere deep and primal. Hayes didn't try to comfort me or tell me to stop. He simply sat beside me and waited while I mourned everything I'd lost. My marriage, my children, my life as I'd known it. When the tears finally slowed, I looked up at him with swollen eyes. He said there was a video. Hayes nodded and opened the laptop. Are you sure you want to watch it now? It's hard, Victoria, seeing him like that. Show me. He pulled up a file and pressed play, then stepped back to give me privacy. Daniel appeared on screen, and I gasped. He looked so frail, so diminished from the robust man I'd married. He was sitting in a chair I didn't recognize, probably in this very storage unit, wearing a gray cardigan I'd given him for Christmas years ago. His hands trembled as he adjusted the camera. "Hello, Vic," he said, and his voice was weak but clear. "If you're watching this, then my children have succeeded in killing me. I'm recording this on March 15th, 3 weeks after I confronted Catherine about the medications. She denied everything, of course, but I could see it in her eyes. She knew that I knew, and she decided to speed up the timeline." He paused, struggling for breath. "I've increased the dose of heart medication they think I don't know they're tampering with. I'm documenting every pill, every symptom. The toxicology reports will show what they did. But I need you to hear this from me, in my own words, while I still can." For the next 20 minutes, I watched my husband detail everything: the manipulation, the forgery, the financial crimes, the murder plot. He named names, showed documents to the camera, explained how each piece of evidence connected to the next. He was building an airtight case even as his body was failing him, but at the end, his composure cracked. "Victoria," he said, tears streaming down his face, "I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't deserve it. But I need you to know that every day for the past 6 months, since I realized the truth, I've regretted every moment I spent doubting you, every cold word, every time I chose them over you." He wiped his eyes with shaking hands. "You were right. About everything. They turned me into someone I despised, and I let them because it was easier than admitting I'd raised children capable of such cruelty." His voice broke. "I'm sorry I wasn't strong enough to save our marriage, but I can at least try to save your life." The video ended with Daniel looking directly into the camera, his expression a mixture of love and infinite sorrow. "Goodbye, my darling girl. I hope someday you can remember the good years without the pain of these last ones. I hope you find happiness I couldn't give you. And I hope—" his voice caught. "I hope you can forgive me, even though I'll never forgive myself." The screen went black. I sat in silence. My mind numb, my heart shattered and reformed and shattered again. Hayes's phone buzzed. He checked it, and his expression hardened. "Your children just filed a police report," he said. "They're claiming I kidnapped you from the funeral. They're saying you're mentally unstable, and I'm taking advantage of you in your grief." I looked up at him, and something inside me shifted, crystallized. The grief didn't disappear, but beneath it, I felt something I hadn't felt in 5 years. Rage. Cold, clear, purposeful rage. "What do we do now?" I asked. Hayes smiled grimly. "Now? Now we destroy them." Hayes made a phone call while I composed myself, wiping my face with tissues he'd handed me from a box in the storage unit. Daniel had thought of everything. I could hear fragments of his conversation. Federal jurisdiction. Documented evidence of fraud. Attempted murder. Yes, she's safe with me. When he hung up, he turned back to me with a look of grim satisfaction. "Special Agent Teresa Morgan is on her way. She's been working this case with me for the past 2 months, ever since Daniel first brought me the evidence. The police report your children just filed? It actually helps us. Shows consciousness of guilt, panic, Coordination between the three of them. He paused. But we need to move fast. They're going to realize soon that they've lost control of the narrative. Show me everything, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. I want to see every document, every piece of evidence. I want to understand exactly what they did. Hayes nodded approvingly and pulled the filing box toward us. Your husband was meticulous. He organized everything by category and timeline. He opened the lid, revealing neat manila folders, each labeled in Daniel's precise handwriting. The first folder was marked Financial Fraud, Catherine. Inside were bank statements, transfer records, and screenshots of emails. Hayes walked me through them methodically, and with each page, my understanding of my daughter shifted like a kaleidoscope, revealing an uglier pattern. Catherine had started small 5 years ago, $5,000 here, $10,000 there, always with a plausible explanation Daniel had documented. Needed for emergency home repairs. Temporary loan until Michael's bonus came through. Investment opportunity that couldn't wait, but Michael's bonus had never existed. The home repairs were fabricated. The investment opportunities were phantom vehicles for funneling money into her personal accounts. By year 3, Hayes said, pointing to a spreadsheet Daniel had created, she'd taken nearly $400,000. Your husband confronted her once early on. She cried, said she was ashamed, promised to pay it back. He believed her. His jaw tightened. She took another $200,000 the following year. How? I whispered. How did he not see it? Because she's a master manipulator, Hayes said bluntly. And because she had help. He opened the next folder. Financial Fraud, James. My middle son's crimes were more sophisticated. Forged signatures on investment documents. Unauthorized use of Daniel's business accounts. Creation of shell companies that existed only on paper, but through which James had moved nearly $500,000. James has a gambling problem, Hayes explained. Not casino gambling, cryptocurrency, high-risk options trading, things he thought would make him rich quick. Instead, he lost everything, including money that wasn't his. When his wife found out, she threatened to leave. That's when he approached Catherine with a proposal. If they worked together, they could take enough from your husband to solve both their problems. And David? I asked, dreading the answer. My youngest had always been the gentle one, the peacemaker. Surely he hadn't. Hayes's expression told me everything before he opened the third folder. David was the insurance policy, he said quietly. The one who lived closest, who could monitor your husband's health, who had access to his medications. Catherine researched, James acquired, and David administered. The folder contained a nightmare. Prescription records for medications Daniel shouldn't have been taking. Pharmacy receipts from different locations to avoid detection. And most damning, text messages between the 3 siblings, recovered from David's cloud backup that he'd forgotten existed. Catherine to David. Did you give him the extra dose this morning? David to Catherine. Yes. He's sleeping a lot now. How much longer? Catherine to David. Doctor said maybe 3 weeks at this rate. Stay strong. This is for all of us. I felt bile rise in my throat. Hayes handed me a trash can just in time. When I'd finished being sick, I sat back against the wall, my entire body trembling. They talked about it like they were discussing a meal plan. Psychopathy runs in families sometimes, Hayes said, his voice gentle despite the harsh truth. But I think in their case it was greed. Pure, simple greed. They convinced themselves they deserved that money more than you did, that your husband owed them for being difficult children to raise. That's a direct quote from Catherine's journal, which Daniel found and photographed. He showed me images of handwritten pages, my daughter's looping script detailing justifications for theft and murder that made my blood run cold. Dad has always been controlling. This is just taking back what should have been ours anyway. Mom's weak. She'll be fine without him. Or she won't. And that solves another problem. Either way, we win. I don't understand, I said, my voice breaking. I gave them everything. We gave them everything. Private schools, college funds, down payments on houses, endless support. and they felt entitled to more. Hayes closed the journal photos. Victoria, you need to understand something. This isn't your fault. You didn't fail as a mother. Some people are born with a moral compass, and some people aren't. You can raise them the same way, give them the same love, and they'll turn out completely different. But all three of them, Catherine corrupted the other two. Your husband's notes indicate she spent years grooming James, exploiting his financial desperation. And David, Hayes hesitated. David was always desperate for his siblings' approval. Catherine knew that. She made him believe that helping them was the only way to be part of the family. That doesn't excuse what he did. No, Hayes agreed. It doesn't. But it might explain it. His phone buzzed again. He checked it and swore softly. They're at your house. Catherine just posted on social media that she's desperately worried about her missing mother who was taken by a stranger from the funeral. She's asking people to call the police if they see you. I felt a flash of cold fear. She's building her narrative, making me look like the victim who needs rescuing, so that when the truth comes out, people will think I'm confused, manipulated, mentally unstable. Hayes nodded. Exactly. It's the same playbook they used on your husband. He stood and offered me his hand. Which is why we're not waiting. Agent Morgan is 10 minutes out. When she gets here, we're going to your house with federal authority, and we're going to end this, tonight. They'll deny everything. They will, Hayes agreed, until we show them what we have. Until they realize your husband recorded them. Until they understand that their text messages, their financial records, their forged documents, all of it is already in federal hands. I let him pull me to my feet, my legs unsteady, but my resolve hardening with each passing second. What happens to them? Prison? If the evidence holds, and it will, Catherine and James are looking at 15 to 20 years for fraud, conspiracy to commit murder, and attempted murder. David might get less if he cooperates, but he'll still do significant time. 15 to 20 years. My children. My babies. Except they weren't babies anymore. They were calculating criminals who had murdered their father and planned to murder me. Good, I said, and meant it. A black SUV pulled into the parking lot. A woman in her 40s stepped out, dressed in a dark suit, her badge visible on her hip. She had sharp eyes that took in everything at once. Me, Hayes, the storage unit, the evidence box. Mrs. Ashworth, she said, extending her hand. Special Agent Teresa Morgan, FBI. I'm very sorry for your loss, and I'm sorry we're meeting under these circumstances. I shook her hand, finding her grip firm and reassuring. Thank you for helping my husband, for believing him. Your husband was a brave man. The documentation he provided is some of the most thorough I've seen in 20 years of investigating white-collar crime. She glanced at the box. Colonel Hayes has briefed me on the situation. Your children have filed a missing persons report and are currently at your residence. We have agents positioning nearby. When you're ready, we'd like you to return home with us. Return home? I repeated. Not understanding. Hayes stepped forward. We need them to incriminate themselves further. With your permission, we'd like you to wear a recording device and confront them. Let them explain away the evidence. Let them threaten you, manipulate you, maybe even try to harm you. Absolutely not, Agent Morgan cut in sharply, shooting Hayes a look. What the colonel means is that we'd like you to speak with them while we're present and recording, with full protection. You won't be in any danger. But hearing their responses, their justifications, their reactions when confronted with evidence, it strengthens our case considerably. You want me to face them? My voice sounded distant to my own ears. After everything they've done. I know it's asking a lot, Morgan said gently. And if you're not comfortable, we can arrest them based on what we have. But Victoria, may I call you Victoria? I nodded. Victoria, cases like this can be difficult to prosecute. Defense attorneys will argue the evidence was manipulated, that your husband was mentally ill, that you're a vindictive widow. But if we have recordings of them admitting to even pieces of it, if we can document them attempting to gaslight you or threaten you in the moment, it removes all reasonable doubt, I finished. Exactly. I thought about Daniel's video, about his trembling hands and tear-stained face. about the way he'd looked into the camera and apologized for not being strong enough to fight when it mattered. I could be strong enough for both of us. "I'll do it," I said. "I'll face them. But I want to see their faces when they realize they've lost. I want them to know that their father outsmarted them, that I survived despite their best efforts." I looked at both agents. I want them to know they failed. Hayes smiled, fierce and proud. "That's the Victoria your husband told me about, the fighter he fell in love with before life beat it out of her." Agent Morgan pulled equipment from her vehicle, a small recording device that clipped inside my dress, nearly invisible. As she fitted it, she explained the plan. "We'll arrive at your house together. You'll go inside first. We'll be outside, listening, ready to intervene if anything escalates. Ask them direct questions. Why did you file a police report? What are you afraid of? What did you do to your father?" Let them respond. Let them dig their own graves. And if they try to hurt me, we'll be through that door in seconds, Hayes promised. "You have my word, Victoria. I didn't keep Daniel alive just to let his children destroy you." The drive to my house took 20 minutes. 20 minutes of rehearsing questions in my mind, of steadying my breathing, of transforming my grief into cold determination. Hayes drove while Agent Morgan sat in the back, coordinating with other agents via text. When we pulled onto my street, I could see lights blazing in every window of the house I'd lived in for 30 years. My house, the one Daniel had secretly transferred back into my name. Catherine's car was in the driveway, along with James's truck and David's sedan, all three of them waiting. "Remember," Morgan said as I prepared to get out, "stay calm, keep them talking. And know that we're right here." I nodded, adjusted my dress, and walked toward the front door with my key in hand. Before I could insert it, the door flew open. Catherine stood there, her face a perfect mask of relieved concern that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Mom!" "Oh, thank God!" She reached for me, and I let her hug me, feeling the stiffness in her body, the performance in her touch. "We've been so worried. That man who took you from the cemetery, are you all right? Did he hurt you?" I stepped back, out of her embrace, and looked past her into the house. James and David stood in the hallway, their expressions carefully neutral. "He didn't take me," I said clearly, for the recording device and for myself. "I went with him willingly. His name is Colonel William Hayes. He was your father's best friend." The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. "Mom," James said, stepping forward with false warmth, "you're confused. Dad didn't have any friends in the military. He never served. See?" "Don't," I interrupted, my voice sharp as broken glass. "Don't lie to me anymore. I know everything. Your father told me everything." Catherine's mask slipped, just for a second. Fear flashed across her features before she recovered. "Dad was very sick at the end, Mom. Sometimes he said things that weren't true." "He recorded a video," I said, walking past her into my own home. "Before he died, he told me what you did, all of you." The three of them exchanged glances, a silent conversation I could no longer interpret, but didn't need to. I saw the panic. I saw the calculation. I saw them decide, in that moment, to double down. "Mom," David said, his voice gentle, concerned, the same tone he'd used while poisoning his father. "We need to get you to a doctor. You're not thinking clearly. The grief didn't make your father document $600,000 in theft," I said. "The grief didn't create text messages where you discussed increasing his medication dosage. The grief didn't forge my signature on financial documents." Silence. Complete, damning silence. Then Catherine laughed, a high, brittle sound. "This is insane. You're listening to some stranger who showed up at the funeral claiming to know Dad. Mom, don't you see? He's probably after money himself." "Colonel Hayes doesn't want money," I said quietly. "He wants justice. For your father. For me. And he's going to get it." James's face went red. "You ungrateful! We've done everything for you. Taken care of you. Made sure you didn't embarrass Dad. Protected you from yourself." "Protected me?" My voice rose despite my attempt at control. You were planning to kill me! Catherine had already written my suicide note. The words hung in the air like smoke after a gunshot. Catherine went very still. That's a serious accusation, Mother. One you can't possibly prove. Actually, came Hayes's voice from the doorway. She can. All three of my children spun around. Hayes stood there with Agent Morgan, both holding their credentials high. FBI, Morgan announced. Catherine Ashworth, James Ashworth, David Ashworth, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, elder abuse, and attempted murder. The next moments blurred. Morgan reading rights, other agents flooding into the house, my children's faces cycling through shock, rage, and finally, terrible understanding. David broke first. I didn't want to. I told them it was wrong, but they said Dad would be better off, that he was suffering. Shut up! Catherine hissed at him. Don't say another word. But David was crying now, his composure shattered. I'm sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry. I didn't know it would go this far. Catherine said it would just be like helping him sleep, that it wasn't really hurting him. I said shut up! Catherine lunged toward him, but an agent caught her, pulling her back. She turned her fury on me instead. This is your fault. You were always weak, always in the way. Dad would have given us everything if you hadn't been there, taking up space, being useless. That's enough, Hayes said coldly, stepping between us. You have the right to remain silent. I suggest you use it. As they led my children out in handcuffs, Catherine turned back one last time. The mask was completely gone now, revealing the hatred beneath. I hope you're happy, she spat. You've destroyed this family. I met her eyes, my voice steady. No, Catherine, you destroyed it. I'm just making sure everyone knows. Agent Morgan stayed behind as the others were taken away. She looked at me with something like respect. That was incredibly brave, she said, and incredibly painful, I imagine. Yes, I agreed. Then, after a pause, but also freeing. Outside, I could hear neighbors gathering, drawn by the commotion. I could imagine the whispers already starting, the shocked speculation. Let them talk. The truth would come out. Daniel had made sure of that. Hayes returned to the house. His expression softer now. It's done. They'll be processed tonight, arraigned tomorrow. With David's confession recorded, and the evidence we have, their lawyers are going to strongly suggest they take a plea deal. How long? I asked. Catherine's facing the most serious charges, probably 15 to 20 years. James will likely get 12 to 15. David, with his cooperation, maybe 7 to 10. He paused. Is that justice enough? I thought about it. About 37 years of marriage. About 3 children I'd raised with love. About 5 years of isolation and gaslighting and planned murder. It's not about enough, I said finally. It's about truth. About making sure they can't do this to anyone else. About making sure Daniel didn't die for nothing. Hayes nodded. Your husband would be proud of you. Would he? I asked. Genuine uncertainty in my voice. After everything? Victoria, he spent his last conscious moments making sure you'd be protected, that you'd know the truth, that you'd survive. Hayes's voice was firm. Yes. He would be proud. Agent Morgan closed her notebook. We'll need you to come to the federal building tomorrow to give a formal statement, but for tonight, you should rest. Is there somewhere you can stay? Someone who can be with you? I looked around my house, the house where I'd raised my children, celebrated holidays, built a life I'd thought was real. It felt like a stranger's home now. I'll stay here, I said. This is my house, mine. I'm not running anymore. After they left, I walked through the rooms in the silence. Every photograph on the wall felt like evidence of a lie, every memento a false memory. In Daniel's study, my study now, I found his reading glasses on the desk, exactly where he'd left them. I picked them up, feeling the weight of them, and something inside me finally broke open. I cried for the man I'd married, for the man he'd become, for the man who'd tried, too late, to make things right. And when the tears finally stopped, I felt something I hadn't felt in 5 years. Peace, 3 months later. The courtroom was smaller than I'd expected, less dramatic than the movies made it seem, just fluorescent lights, wooden benches, and the quiet shuffle of papers as the judge reviewed the plea agreements. I sat in the front row with Colonel Hayes beside me, William, as I'd learned to call him over the past months. His presence had become something steady in the chaos, not romantic, but fraternal. The way Daniel had described their bond. A guardian, a friend. Catherine entered first, her designer clothes replaced by a prison jumpsuit, her perfect hair pulled back in a plain ponytail. She didn't look at me. James followed, thinner than I remembered, his swagger completely gone. And finally, David, whose eyes found mine immediately, filled with a shame so deep it was almost physical. The judge, a woman in her 60s with steel gray hair and sharp eyes, read through the charges with clinical precision. Conspiracy to commit murder, elder abuse, financial fraud, wire fraud, forgery. The words felt surreal even after 3 months of living with the truth. The evidence in this case is overwhelming, Judge Patricia Hernandez said, her voice carrying the weight of decades on the bench. The premeditation, the coordination, the callous disregard for human life, particularly the life of your own father, represents some of the most disturbing criminal behavior I've encountered, Catherine's lawyer stood. Your Honor, my client wishes to allocate— Sit down, Mr. Brennan, the judge said flatly. I've read the allocution letters. I'm not interested in hearing manufactured remorse designed to reduce sentences. She looked at each of my children in turn. The evidence speaks for itself. Your father's video testimony, the financial records, the text messages, your brother's recorded confession. There is no doubt about what you did or why you did it. She paused, letting the silence stretch. Catherine Ashworth, you orchestrated a scheme to defraud and ultimately murder your father for financial gain. You corrupted your brothers, weaponized their weaknesses, and showed not one moment of genuine remorse, even when confronted. The court sentences you to 18 years in federal prison with no possibility of parole for 12 years. Catherine's face remained blank, but I saw her hands clench into fists. James Ashworth, you were a willing participant who prioritized your own financial irresponsibility over your father's life. 16 years, no parole for 10. James's head dropped. David Ashworth. The judge's voice softened slightly. You were manipulated, but you were not innocent. You administered the medications that killed your father. You knew what you were doing. However, your cooperation with investigators and your genuine remorse are noted. 10 years. Possibility of parole after 6. David's sob was audible throughout the courtroom. Judge Hernandez turned to me then, her expression gentler. Mrs. Ashworth, I cannot imagine the pain this family's betrayal has caused you. I hope these sentences provide some measure of justice and closure. Your husband's courage in documenting these crimes likely saved your life. I hope you can find peace in that knowledge. Thank you, Your Honor, I managed, my voice steady despite the tears on my cheeks. As they led my children away, David turned back one last time. Mom, he said, his voice breaking. I'm sorry. I know it doesn't change anything, but I'm so sorry. I nodded once. Not forgiveness, not yet, maybe not ever, but acknowledgement that I'd heard him. Catherine said nothing, her face carved from ice. James stared at the floor. And then they were gone. Outside the courthouse, reporters waited. They'd been following the case since the arrests became public. Mrs. Ashworth, how do you feel about the sentences? Do you plan to forgive your children? What will you do now? William guided me past them with practiced efficiency, his hand steady on my elbow. We didn't speak until we were in his car, driving away from the courthouse and the cameras and the weight of judgment. How are you? He asked after several minutes. I considered the question carefully. I don't know. Relieved? Sad? Free? I laughed shakily. All of it at once, I suppose. That sounds about right. He glanced at me. Daniel would have wanted to be here today. He would have wanted to see justice served. He was here, I said softly, touching the locket around my neck, the one I'd found in Daniel's desk, containing a photo of us from our wedding day, young and hopeful and unbroken. In a way, we drove in comfortable silence until William pulled up in front of my house. Our weekly dinner had become routine, his way of honoring Daniel's request to watch over me, and my way of not feeling completely alone in the world. "Same time next week?" he asked. "Actually," I said, surprising myself, "I wanted to ask you something. There's a grief support group at the community center for people who've lost spouses. I've been thinking about going, but—" I trailed off, feeling vulnerable. "But it's scary to walk in alone," William finished gently. "Yes." "I'll go with you," he said without hesitation. "As far as the door, or inside if you want the company. Whatever you need." Tears pricked my eyes again, not from sadness this time, but from gratitude. "Thank you, for everything, for keeping your promise to Daniel, for helping me survive this." "You survived this yourself, Victoria," William said firmly. "I just made sure you had the weapons you needed to fight. The courage was all yours." 6 months later, I stood in what used to be Daniel's study, now transformed into something entirely mine. The heavy mahogany desk was gone, replaced by a lighter writing table positioned by the window. The dark curtains had been donated, and spring sunlight poured through the glass. The photographs of the children were packed away, not destroyed, but not displayed either. I wasn't ready to burn those bridges entirely, though I suspected I never would be ready to rebuild them either. Some betrayals don't heal, they just scar over. On my desk sat a manuscript, 302 pages of my story, written over 6 months of therapy and grief and slow, painful healing. My therapist, Dr. Sarah Chen, had suggested writing as a way to process trauma. What started as journal entries had become something more. A testimony, a warning, a survival guide. Recognizing manipulation in family relationships was the working title. Sarah thought it could help others who were being gaslit by people they loved, who were being isolated and blamed and slowly erased. The doorbell rang, pulling me from my thoughts. I glanced at the clock, right on time. I opened the door to find Evelyn Martinez, my new neighbor, holding a casserole dish. She was 72, widowed like me, with kind eyes and a no-nonsense attitude I appreciated. "Book club meeting tonight," she reminded me. "And I'm not taking no for an answer. You've missed the last two." I smiled, genuine this time, not the forced expression I'd worn for so many years. "I'll be there. I promise." "Good." She handed me the casserole. "And this is for dinner. You're still too thin." After she left, I sat at my kitchen table, the same table where I'd eaten silent meals while my family plotted against me, and realized something profound. I was happy. Not ecstatically, not perfectly, but genuinely, quietly happy. The house was mine. The money Daniel had hidden away was mine, more than enough to live comfortably, to donate to causes I cared about, to start fresh. My days were my own. My choices were my own. I'd joined the grief support group and found unexpected friendship there. I'd started volunteering at a women's shelter, helping others escape situations I understood too well. I'd reconnected with old friends I'd lost touch with during the years of isolation. I was building a life, not the life I'd planned. Not the life I'd lost, but a life nonetheless. My phone buzzed with a text from William. "Dinner this Sunday? I'm attempting to cook. It will probably be terrible." I laughed and typed back, "I'll bring wine and low expectations." He'd become something unexpected in my life. Not a replacement for Daniel, not a romance, but family in the truest sense. The brother I'd never had. The friend who'd walked through fire for me because he'd promised someone he loved that he would. That evening, I visited Daniel's grave for the first time since the trial. The cemetery was quiet, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the headstones. I stood before the simple marker, Daniel James Ashworth, beloved husband, and felt the familiar ache of loss mixed with something more complicated. They got what they deserved, I said softly. Your evidence. Your planning. It worked. You saved me, in the end. The wind rustled through the trees. I'm angry at you still, I continued, for believing them, for the years you stole from us, for dying before we could find our way back to each other. I paused, wiping away tears. But I'm also grateful for trying, for caring enough at the end to make things right, for loving me enough to protect me even after you were gone. I placed fresh flowers on the grave, not the roses he'd preferred, but wildflowers, the kind I loved. I'm going to be okay, I told him. Better than okay, actually. I'm going to live, Daniel. Really live. The way you asked me to in your letter. As I walked back to my car, I felt lighter somehow. Not free of grief. That would take longer, maybe forever, but free of the weight of lies. Free of the burden of being told I was crazy, worthless, invisible. At the cemetery gates, I paused and looked back one last time at Daniel's grave, small in the distance. At your funeral, they put me at the back, I whispered. Behind the speakers, invisible, blamed, discarded. I smiled then, sad but genuine. But in the end, the truth put me exactly where I belonged. I climbed into my car, my choice, my life, and drove home to an evening of book club and casserole and friendship. To a future I would write myself. To a life reclaimed. The end. Hey, you listened this far. I hope you enjoyed this story. Be sure to like this video, subscribe for more stories, and share your thoughts in the comments below. See you in the next one.